Thank you, Betty. Thank you, everyone, for joining the meeting. As Betty mentioned, that I'm the executive lead for Square One EcoAfrica, and I work with an entire team. And Square One EcoAfrica is basically an organization that wants to work or is working with communities, working with government, working with policymakers, working with funders to come up with solutions that speak to the community. So we are co-designing Africa's future or sustainable future through ASAL and rural communities, and so that we are able to ensure that every decision that is made has them on board. Square One EcoAfrica's vision is to have a climate resilient Africa, a food secure Africa, and a community empowered Africa, where all decisions are not made from boardrooms, but are made from the communities that we speak to. Our biggest group of target group is the community, that is the rural and ASAL communities. And how do we get into this conversation as Square One EcoAfrica? Ours is pegged on 3 pillars, that is eco-sustainability, development, that is EcoTech Innovation, where this conversation is being hosted, and eco-storytelling and advocacy for impact. Our 4 things that we want to achieve is that innovation plus community power plus sustainability equals transformational impact. As we get into the space of climate change adaptation and mitigation in Africa, we have identified a lot of, in terms of where do we peg ourselves, where do we start this conversation so that we're able to get this, to co-create with the communities. And so our pillars have 6 thematic areas where we focus on. The first thematic area that we focus on, that this conversation is pegged on, is digital innovation, data tools, and early warning systems. Because we realize that we are at the stage, or we are on the advent of AI technology. We, back in 2015, we were talking about the advent of internet connectivity in Africa. And then now we are also now in the technological revolution, if I might say. And so AI technology is something that we cannot erase from the moving forward or the future and forecasting for Africa. So digital innovation, data tools, and early warning systems, where this conversation is pegged on, is actually a niche that Square One EcoAfrica is working with to ensure that we are giving community not giving them power, because they already have the power. We are co-creating this power together to be able to create a sustainable Africa. Digital innovation, data tools, and early warning systems are pegged on the pillar of EcoTech Innovation Hub, where we believe that this technology that is coming up has a lot more good to do than adversity. I know for people who are in the academic space, there is always the encouragement of, please do not use AI to paraphrase, to change, to replace humans. And that is not what we're doing. What we're doing is, please use AI and technology to help us be able to adapt to climate change effects, help us be able to mitigate climate change effects. For the longest time in Africa, we are not talking about mitigation, we are always talking about adaptation, but we have the opportunities to be able to, and the resources and the human capital to be able to get ourselves to a place where we are mitigating it before we start even thinking about adaptation. So Square One EcoAfrica is pegged on the 3 pillars and the areas of focus that I have mentioned that really speak to the conversation today. The other areas of focus that I would want to mention, because they also continue to build up on what we want to achieve in our vision of a climate resilient Africa, is climate smart agriculture and agroforestry. We cannot, where we are going to be applying our data tools, where we are applying the digital innovation on, we are talking about gender and in climate resilience. We cannot refuse the fact that we have gender at the heart of any activity and any action that leads to adaptation and leads to mitigation. We also have, we are an organization that is largely on ASAL areas, and then also we are an organization that also focuses on blue economy and climate coastal resilience as that, because at the end of the day, Africa has the coastal line, and we have a seascape, we have an opportunity to inland waters as well. So we are not refusing the fact that we have communities that live and depends on the inland waters and on blue economy. So how are we helping them be able to mitigate and adapt to climate? And through the three pillars that I've mentioned. We also have just energy transition. We are at a space where we're talking about electricity is the one thing that has overtaken any other infrastructure. Every person on earth needs electricity connection, needs renewable energy, needs energy, clean cooking energy, and all other types of energy to be able to even move forward. Technology relies on energy to be able to transmit, to be able to connect, to be able to advance. So just energy transition is a conversation that we cannot leave behind, and is a conversation that also helps us peg our conversation today. Because without energy, without electricity, without that kind of connectivity, we cannot be talking about AI, we cannot be talking about technology. So Square One EcoAfrica is basically an organization that believes that Africa has the power, Africa has the knowledge, and Africa has the capability within us to be able to move ourselves forward in terms of climate smart sustainability and in terms of adaptation and mitigation.
Thank you, Rosalia. I think you've set quite the stage for the conversation that is coming. And with that very strong introduction, I would like to ask you to take your seat at the podium, albeit virtually. Yes, since you're our first panelist. And now let me introduce the other panelists who are joining Rosalia. We have Nicholas Moura Sabwa. He is the CTO at COHESU and a community tech innovator, advancing climate resilience through data systems, indigenous knowledge, and locally driven digital tools across Eastern Africa. He leads COHESU's climate health programs, youth, children empowerment, program, and Chief AI Community Insights Engine Initiative. Karibu sana, Nicholas Moura Sabwa. If you could say hi to the meeting. Karibu sana. There you are. Yeah. Next is Julie Ouma. Julie Ouma is the thematic lead for regional early warning systems at ICPAC IGAD, that is the IGAD Climate Prediction and Application Center. He drives key initiatives that strengthen multi-hazard early warning and anticipatory action across the IGAD region. He leads major regional platforms such as East Africa Hazards Watch, HUSICA, and the East Africa Drought Watch, supporting governments with data-driven climate risk analysis and disaster preparedness. Karibu sana, Julie. Now,
thank you very much, Betty.
Yes, welcome, and it's good to see you. So I will throw the first question in, and this one goes to all of you actually. As Africa continues to experience increasingly severe climate impacts, based on what we have seen, the impacts are very recent, including landslides in Kenya across the region. There's drought in other areas. So these ASAL regions are experiencing very severe climate impacts. So why is African-led, locally grounded innovation essential to build resilience in such high vulnerability areas? I think I will start this one with Julie, and then we will go to Rosalia and Nicholas. Please, Julie.
Thank you, Betty. For me, I think the take is Africa solution, if we do have it locally led, is quite essential, because in most cases, community adapt at different levels. And us having intelligent or smart solution is a key thing. So I would still think that we must have it locally led, because when the challenges talk about scarce resources, for example, in the ASAL, the major two things that they face more is water scarcity, competition for vegetation, especially for their livestock. Majorly, it will be a pasture and water-related issues. So if we have something that can link through the cultural or indigenous knowledge in this sense, would be quite good. A good example was in southern Ethiopia some time back, and we noticed that they have these ground dug holes that they cover with an iron sheet. So when there's heavy rains and there are floods, they are not complaining. In fact, they're happy. They say they rather have floods than drought. So then this depression or holes they create on the ground they use them as storage for water. And within their local cultural norm is that they only open one when the other one is dry. So it's not open to everyone. They just have a control measure within their community setup that they'll be using one after another when there's water scarcity issues. Other cases is where parts of community have regular areas which they cover or shield, that we only use this part, especially during drought. Once we deplete this area, then we can move to another area and then try to engage even the local administration to do that. So I think not as a scientist just proposing something for them, but we need to engage with them that, okay, at local level, how do you manage these challenges? So as IGAD, we have tried to look at this and even use water point kind of a monitoring level in case we see they are dry or medium or low. We can try to guide administrators that from this region, especially in northeastern Kenya, they are dry and they're likely to cross over to Uganda. So I need to talk to the local administration there so that you manage to monitor anticipated conflict in that area. So I'll push still for the idea that for us to have smart solution, we combine both science and indigenous knowledge in this sense. Back to you, Betty.
Thank you. Combining science and indigenous knowledge. I like that. Rosalia, your answer to that question on why this is important.
Thank you, Betty. And yes, you had forewarned us that your internet may be misbehaving. One of those is the audio, but do not, I think we will continue to make it better. I will address this question this way. I recently read somewhere, someone said, we have overstated that Africa is the one continent that contributes less than 4% of greenhouse gas emissions, but yet we are the ones that are hit the most when it comes to being vulnerable. And I thought to myself when I read that, if we do not continue saying this, we do not understand the problem, and then we do not then come up with solutions. So in my heart, I thought the facts and figures are not lying, and they usually say numbers don't lie. When they say that, when facts say that we are the less contributors of greenhouse gases, yet we are the ones that are affected harshest when it comes to climate effect, that is a fact. And then that brings out a problem. And so when that problem comes out, and I like what my colleague Julie has said, they have identified a problem, and it is a problem. So how do we come up with these solutions? And that is where the locally grounded innovations are coming in, because the problem is already there. And if we are to be able to speak to, say, for example, monitoring water point levels, we need to have identified that a problem is there. And so we are working together with these communities, because we don't sit in a boardroom and say, there's a problem somewhere in Marsabit, there's a problem somewhere in West Pokot. You get to speak to communities, and communities tell you, these are the things that you're grappling with. For example, when we speak about arid areas, we're talking about pasture, we're talking about water access. So these are not things that we just sit in boardrooms and say, this is the problem that is on ground. Yes, situations, and we have organizations and people that have done that before. But then when you bring in communities, you get to understand there is a deeper story. There is what they hold dear, and there is the need for that locally led, that community-rooted innovation, so that we're able to say that we are grounding these innovations. We are not just bringing in, say, for example, an application that helps to monitor water levels. I'm sorry, Julie, let me use this, but this is not the case on ground. And then we're saying we brought it to people in Marsabit, or we brought it to people in Mandera, take it to work on it. And then maybe their issue was not that, their issue goes deeper, but we did not give ourselves an opportunity to sit with them, to innovate with them, to start thinking from their perspective, to start thinking, okay, if this issue was to be solved, how do you think we can solve it? How do we bring in your ideas to come up with this African-led, locally grounded innovation, so that we are able to now say, after we have left the stage, because we are people who've gone there, After we have left the stage, can the communities continue to engage with this technology to continue their sustainability, to continue making better their livelihoods? So those are the questions that help us to realize that exactly we need to have these conversations, these implementations, these projects done in co-design mode and method. This co-creation method is the only way you're going to be able to come up with solutions. And there was, according to a World Bank report of 2023, they clearly state that communities co-create solutions, adoption levels can increase. When communities co-create solutions, adoption levels can increase by up to 60%. So when we talk about adoption levels, we're talking about this solution came from them, so it's easier for them to adopt to it and work on it. When you bring them solutions, you will do what everybody else is doing. Bringing solutions to them, let them figure it out. If they don't figure it out, it becomes an opportunity wasted. It becomes so much money wasted when you brought solutions to them. But if you work with them, as Julie has rightfully put it, if you work with them, if you build with them, those solutions are going to help them adopt it. And the numbers, again, I say they don't lie. If we're talking about 60% adoption, then you're talking about success. And that is what we want. We don't want to be spoon-feeding our communities. We don't want to be spoon-fed as Africans. We just want to be given the net to go and fish. Thank you. Sorry, back to you, Betty.
Thank you. Thank you. The next to go and fish, that is very important. Nicholas, you are in the technology space and you work with these communities. What have you seen in terms of just contextualizing those communities, the challenges that they face, and even their uptake of the technology that you take to them and co-creating this?
Yeah, so for our arid and semi-arid land areas and communities, like Rosalia said, they tend to carry the burden of an imported problem. And when the problem is identified, you still have the problem of people trying to do top-down systems that cannot effectively solve these challenges. So for the resilience of the regions we are in question, they depend on tools that are designed around how people actually live and their social norms. That's why core community structures will come into play. You have to look at the mobile pastoralism, informal economies, and community governance systems that are based on their settings. So from the local perspective, it goes that, like Julia said, indigenous knowledge has to adapt to things like infrastructural realities, say low connectivity. And so as you're building your tools, it's important to realize that it's the community that will dictate what direction you take. So you have to make sure your systems are very community-centric. That way, it also builds trust with the communities for uptake. So for African-led grassroots approaches, we basically say then to ensure the climate solutions are not temporary projects, you need these solutions to embed themselves in the community. There must be community ownership, there must be cultural relevance, and long-term system approaches. That's what I would say.
Thank you, Nicholas. Thank you for that thought. And I would like to now go to Julie and ask you how IGAD, you mentioned the indigenous knowledge that is required, or you work with indigenous solutions. So how is IGAD strengthening that particular facet of empowering communities in the region?
Yeah, so for us, when it comes to pastoral areas and our livelihood, we have a specialized center we call IGAD Center for Pastoral Areas and Livestock related works. So what we normally do is anything engaging pastoral community, we have to work with, or rather collaborate with the local organization through this specialized center, and a ICPAC, which is more or less on climate application, and also dealing with disaster, we support such kind of engagement. So we engage with them in terms of working together, and especially when we want to map the mobility element of this pastoral community, we generate with the community elders the transhumance route, which are seasonal based. And this case help us to monitor if our Center for Pastoral Areas indicate that we will have a surplus in forage this coming season, probably in the western part of the maybe cross-border area between Kenya and Uganda or South Sudan. In this case, we can superimpose transhumant routes with the communities so that they know that if this happens, we need to cross to this other level. Then we engage with them in the sense that they get cross-border IDs that can help them cross freely without the other party thinking that they're coming to raid their livestock or rather steal the livestock from the other country. So this one way we try to monitor this. We also have open platforms which we develop with input from different affected countries. For example, example give is the East Africa Hazards Watch. We can develop this system in the office, but then how do we make it useful to them? So before we validate or make it operational, we have about 3 iterations with them. So we call for a workshop for engagement with the communities or the member states, and we say, okay, we are having this proposed solution to address this challenge or these challenges. What will be your take? And they say, okay, remove this, add this, but what about if you incorporate this and that? It will help us address A, B, C, D. So we get all those inputs, we come and implement and still go back to them. You indicated A, B, C, D to be integrated, 1, 2, 3 to be removed in order to address your needs. How does this new version look like? Then they say, okay, you get now a few comments, this much improve, address this and that. And then probably there will be another thinking that will come in. Now you can add 1 and 2, and then you bring it back, we see how it works. We do that iteration, we engage them again until they're all clear that this is something that will address their needs, then we go to production with it. So there are quite a number of areas that we collaborate with them, talk about individual hazard, multi-hazard aspect, especially now that our region experience hazard one after another. If today we are talking about drought, the next season it will be too much rain, leading to floods, landslide, and so on. Before even recover, there's desert locust. Before even recover from that, there's another drought. So now we're looking at holistically this level of hazard, and we are considering the multi-hazard approach in this level of integration, and all national entities are always in, we have focal points from all national agencies who work with us to make sure we address the community needs. So basically, the number of strengthening of this forecasting or early warning system, this is the nature of work we have with them, which more or less co-production. We don't just push the warning to them, but in any case, early warning is a mandate of the national government to issue. For us, we can just give advisories, but the mandated institution are from the national government. So we empower them or strengthen their skills and capacity to do so. So Betty, this the light, probably short feedback I'll give in just in totality what you can relate in studying the communities in matters early on. Back to you.
Thank you for that, Julie. And I would like to come to Rosalia. What Julie has mentioned takes a lot of data precision so that you can do precise early warnings to those communities. And so I would like to hear from you the data gaps that affect most ASAD regions and deter, these resilience efforts and what can be done to make sure that we are improving the data availability to ensure that the mitigation efforts and adaptation efforts are stronger. Rosalia?
Thank you, Betty, for the question. And I just want to pick from where Julie has left. You have asked what are the challenges? And the challenge, Julie has actually now put it out very clearly. You cannot work alone. You have to go, iterate, come back, go, come back, go, come back, until both the community and the person who's helping in developing the technological application, in developing the early warning system, has it right. So the challenge and the biggest challenge I think we are facing as a continent and as a community is the fact that that process that Julie has clearly defined misses. One, because at the end of the day, you've gotten an investor to help you be able to come up with a system, or you have someone you have to report to with a deadline. And that process, if Julie was to be more clear or get into deeper into it, it is not something that you can say we did it, we are going to do it in 2 weeks, because the situation that you continue finding on ground is not the same every day. He has clearly mentioned that today you're going to be discussing floods. You start thinking, how do we help you be able to come up with, co-produce a system that is going to help us forewarn us. By the time you're going back to them, it's drought. And unfortunately for asal areas, this affects when it rains, it pours literally. This affects when they come, they affect. And if it is flooding, flash flood, there we have them. It is destruction of property, it is loss of life. If it is a drought, it is famine. It is destruction of property, it is loss of life. So these effects and these adversities are not things that you can say now we will first of all finish up with flooding, then we go to drought, then we go, and you can't say that we will need 2 weeks. Sometimes the road connectivity has been broken down because of the effect of the adversity. So that's what Julie has said is what I am emphasizing on. That process of co-creating and working with the community. Something else I would want to mention is the fact that, and using Kenya as a context, the last 2-3 weeks on our news, we have been talking about Kesongoch. I hope I'm not butchering that name. And Marakwet and landslides, we were talking about an entire town having been flooded with mudslides. And this is something that has happened before. We have Murang'a, for instance, where it's tectonic, I think, where mudslides affect them. We have areas where we know drought affects them, and when it rains, it floods. Even Nairobi, for instance, when it rains, heavy rain, good heavy rain, it floods. So this effect, or I would say weather patterns, are not new to us. And so when we are talking about how do we then mitigate this challenge, we are talking about something that has been there with us, has been happening to us, and something that now needs a solution. And so if we are talking about that, at least we have background check and background information where you can be able to say, this effect, we can deal with it this way. And I think these are some of the data that ICPAC uses when they are trying to start the production and then now going to speak to communities and everything else. And so how air now thinks and comes into this barrier or this challenge is that EcoTech Hub that I mentioned, where we are also now thinking that we need to also, and we continue the entry of artificial intelligence, the entry of solar-powered digital access points, the entry of digitized indigenous and knowledge platforms. And the reason I say that is because we cannot purport to understand a region better than the person who lives in that region. And before science, or let me not say science, before the entry of modernization, people continued to tell weather patterns with their own traditional indigenous way of working. So how do we digitize their indigenous way of working to be able to forewarn them before even the government, because as Julie has said, it's the government's mandate to tell on early warning systems. Before we wait for the chief, the radio, anybody else, government to be able to bring out this information, the people, the villagers, the elders have already had those conversations. They have already told their community people that this is how we used to tell weather patterns, and this is how we think this weather is going to affect us in the next 2 weeks, the next 3 weeks. So how do we digitize that? And how do we also put that into context when you're coming up with these solutions that are pegged on technology, these solutions that are pegged on digital innovation? How do we peg that in also being aware to the fact that we need solutions that are cost effective. We need solutions that powered energy, the energy that is powering those solutions is accessible and connected to these communities. And we also need to ensure that we have community relevance, so that we get to a place where we are completing the process that Julie started. That production has been accepted by both the community and the organization that is helping develop it, or even the government, be it national government and be it county government. So we need those things put in place for the process to complete and for that system to really work. And then also, much as it is the government's prerogative to help us understand and warn us, sometimes the warning, by the time it reaches the villager, it is the devastation has been done. The disaster has already struck. So the information that comes from within us, and we have been able to work with them to teach them and to pick from them on how they can start telling their own systems, they have picked up and moved. So what we're saying is that, yes, waiting for the government to speak to us is very important, and the government has the biggest connectivity and reach across villages and across counties. But then from village perspective, we are not sitting and waiting until the government tells us. We are using the information that we have. We are using the information that we've gotten to continue working even without necessarily having to wait for someone to come and forewarn us. So I think at the end, the technology is with us, the resources are with us. The only thing is to be able to match them to come up with the best solution.
Thank you. Thank you, Rosalia, for your take on that. And now to you, Nicholas, as you create these innovations and technologies for the local communities, the rural communities to be specific, what design choices ensure climate information is usable by those last mile households in the ASAL areas? And how do you ensure that as you're building, there's also trust in the digital tools among the communities, because they might have been left behind, or they remain underserved by formal climate systems?
Yeah, so going back to the issue of design knowledge coming from the top down, and you can hear it from us that repeatedly and repeatedly, co-creation will take the effort of the builders of these solutions working with the respective communities based on their social norms and experiences. Their lived experiences inform the system better than the people who wish to innovate the systems. You always look at, for this case, you think about three realities. Start with something like low connectivity, low literacy, power challenges, and also the high mobility of some of these communities. We attempt to put some basic infrastructure, and you look at it in terms of first principles. Go back to stripping everything to the bare knuckle bottoms of what the community is seeing and what really would assist them. That way, you're co-creating with them in a way that they can trust that the system is based on their thoughts, and they can help you see the little cracks that most people would not see from a granular level. So for instance, we could say you want to use apps, but sometimes because of connectivity and the remoteness of their movement, you think about tools like USSD and voice-based alerts adapted to local languages. Always know that in these areas, connectivity and power become an issue. And so offline fast approach for the mobile tools has to be considered, because synchronization of data from the community to policymakers and innovators has to take stock of the fact that infrastructure is still a challenge out here. For the intermediaries like community leaders, community health promoters, youth groups, you then want them to be kind of like the interface for the totality of feedback to the communities. So you'd want still a simplified way of presenting this information. So you talk about visual-based and icon-based dashboards that are quick to report back to them what the community is seeing and what the policymakers are advising. Then, of course, like we said, it's community-centric, human-centered design. And you think about not just as systems and the technology, but also the social structure. So human intermediaries, or youth champions, local leaders, because at the end of the day, the climate information will only become as useful at the last mile when it fits the rhythm, the devices, and the decision-making process of the households and communities you're trying to serve. That's how I'd put it.
Thank you, Nicholas. I'll come to you now, Julie, and we are still on the early warning systems. As IGAD, you said that most of the solutions, of course, will be localized as much as you're dealing with the whole region, and governments have to do their part, and other stakeholders have to do their part. So, as IGAD, do you have any, do you work with climate tech innovators, any partnerships, and what does that look like? How do you actualize that?
Yes, thanks, Betty. Yes, we work with tech innovators, and I was happy I had Nicholas indicating that there's also efforts on using things like USSD codes. So the tech innovators work with span across different levels from national, like in Kenya, work with the Bunifu Technologies, which we engage them in developing a mobile app to help us reach the last mile. And one of the key areas, what Nicholas have highlighted on USSD codes, voice messaging, and this partner we engage with, the main goal is to have a multi-layered communication channel, both from web to mobile apps, both on iOS and Android, and also to the feature phones, especially what Nicholas was highlighting, that you need to have systems that are offline. So this is also one area, and you normally make it easy that if our grandmothers in the village can read an M-Pesa message, then they can simply read a small text saying that probably floods are likely to occur from this date and so on. But since there are challenges like literacy levels, we also think of training journalists to use like local radios and such. So at national level, we already have a partner that we work with in this. At regional level, there is like one partner called Speedico that also support the technical improvement of these multi-layered systems to help us at least make sure the warning is sharp and direct to the targeted user. Again, these partners help us to what we call filter, or we call them tags. Like if I want to send a message to Betty, it doesn't go to Nicholas, who doesn't need to get this information that Betty is supposed to get. So this helps us also avoid spamming people's messages. So these partners.
Julie, are you there? I think we lost Julie there. He's back. Julie, can you hear me? Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Yeah, you're back. You're back.
Yeah. So I think it dropped off when I was at regional partner that we work with. Also at global level, there are global partners we engage with, large institutions like University of Oxford that we're working with, and we have also the EU Joint Research Center. And latestly, we are engaging with Google, which have really helped us a lot, giving us cloud computing power so that we make sure all our systems are always up and running. So that premise server, sometimes we get challenges with the power cutout, internet challenges. But when you have cloud computing facilities, which Google have been very supportive, it's quite essential. This week, we're even engaging with Google to support Ethiopia on using machine learning and AI to map flooding events and flooded areas. So areas are likely to receive flooding through several satellite-based analysis with machine learning, and it's quite successful. We are hoping that we'll have this launched by the government of Ethiopia in the coming weeks or months. So we are aiming at probably the first quarter of next year, we have it officially launched. But these partners are quite essential for us. As much as we want to reach the last mile, can we have the information coming in fast and more accurate as possible? So this is the idea of our collaboration with these tech giants at global level and also partners at regional and national level. So I would say this help us, first of all, leverage on the latest technology to improve innovation for our region, and also help us to be at always the latest state of art in terms of science and technology. Back to you, Betty.
Thank you very much, Julie, for that. I'll come to you, Nicholas, now. And you mentioned quite a number of challenges, from low connectivity, low literacy, power challenges, high mobility. And at the same time, you're facing these challenges, you're also innovating for different subpopulations in the ASAL regions. There are women groups, youth groups, agro-pastoralists. As Julie was saying, that someone does not need to receive a message that they do not need. So from your perspective, how do you make sure that you are tailoring tools to these different subpopulations while at the same time maintaining the overall goal of ensuring climate resilience for these communities? Nicholas?
Yes, so yeah, tailoring for the different subpopulations and community stratifications. I'd summarize that in a way to make it simpler, that we talked about community-centric design, we talked about human-centric designs. And when it comes to stratifying your community design for deployment and uptake of the tools you design, digital and technology-based, we've tried and round it up in a model that I'd call persona-based design model. So you're looking at, even within these groups, you have stratifications of, you have youth, within the youth, you have the girls and the boys might have different perspectives on how they uptake the technologies. You'll have pastoralists, but some of the pastoralists are strictly animal keepers. You have agro-pastoralists. Then you have women groups, which has turned out to be a very powerful foundational community system. So with the women groups, you're thinking about doing things like community dashboard boards, maternal well-being, climate advisories, because then their needs might be a bit different in their mobility and when and if a disaster strikes. For the youth, we know they're very technology savvy, they uptake faster. So you're thinking if they can do the mobile apps. They can be part of your remote sensing and mapping endeavors. For the interface, like we said, for the community leadership, community health promotion systems, where the policy and community interface, you need to have things like digital scorecards for reporting events and outcomes of events that were reported. For the very groups that are migrating and agro-pastoralists, you can say you want, like Julie mentioned, you need to have a co-creation system where you're telling them, this is what the maps are showing in terms of pasture, and you're on this route, maybe you need to change on this. So mobility maps that assist these different groups, grazing alerts, water source points and conditions of the water source places, and even simple SMS-based weather advisories, so that holistically, as you're working with the community, you're addressing the different data consumers, so that at the end of the day, they also become data producers in themselves during the co-creations. The architecture for the different groups basically is the same. What changes is basically the pathways, the interface and the language that you provided to the different groups. Every group receives climate intelligence in the format that will probably match their routines, their gender roles, and access patterns to what you're providing. That's how I put it.
Thank you, Nicholas. I'll come to you, Rosalia, now, and just to pick up on what Nicholas has said, you had mentioned earlier that there's an EcoTech Innovation Hub, of course, at Square One EcoAfrica, and it's coming up with digital innovations, data tools for early warning systems as well. Just tell us, who are the target groups of this innovation hub, and what does success look like for the EcoTech Innovation Hub by Square One EcoAfrica?
Thank you, Betty, for the question. And firstly, I would want to let Julie know that you have mentioned rightfully that we are coming up with apps. So we are also available for these collaborations. Julie, when you talk about your partners nationally, partners in the county level, and partners regionally, So I think it's a point for us to continue this conversation, even as since you have already started and we are coming in to strengthen and to work together to ensure that our communities are getting the best. The community groups, and before I get to speak to the community groups that we target under the EcoTech Innovation Hub, I want to throw the spanner into the works in this conversation, because every time we are talking of connectivity and we are talking of internet penetration, access to gadgets, mobile gadgets, I'll call them the USSD ones and the smartphones. We talk about it from a point of illiteracy, okay? And why I say this is because every time we want to speak that communities don't have smartphones, communities don't have USSD phones, SMS phones, communities don't have internet connectivity. However, if you look at most of your WhatsApp messages, the ones that are written, forwarded to many, or that very long WhatsApp message that you need to read, click to read more. Those messages mostly come from our parents, our grandparents in the rural areas. Why? Because the access to internet connectivity and access to mobile phones and SMS gadgets is there. So what we're saying is that, and why I'm saying I'm throwing the spanner into the works is because I had a conversation earlier. We had a workshop at SOAR. And our speaker for that, they told us, why do we keep on thinking that people are not willing to invest in a solution that is going to help them moving forward? Why do we keep on thinking that people who live in the rural areas cannot invest in an application? Why do we keep on thinking that they don't want to use money to make their lives better? And I thought, okay, and the example that that person gave us was people who live in informal settlements and people who live in communities where there is shortage of water spend actually more money in buying and accessing water compared to people who live in urban centers, peri-urban centers where there is water accessibility. And I kept to myself and I thought, oh yeah, by the way, if you do the math, much as it's not monthly, the 50 shillings, 20 shillings that they pay every time is quite a lot. So it's not the refusal of buying into applications and systems. I think it's the focus of the people who are coming out to develop applications and everything, that the people you're going to speak to are either only illiterate or they don't have these gadgets, and that is the face that we start with. However, and I like the fact that we are talking about engaging with them from the get-go, from the brainstorming session. That is when we realize that it's not that they don't want, it's not that they don't have solutions. It's just that nobody is speaking to them, nobody's bringing them to the table, nobody's giving them a seat to the table. And so as EcoTech Innovation Hub, we have that realization. And ours is, we are coming to you with our open hands. What do you have? What are you doing? And the target groups that you're talking about here are the community. We're talking about women, we're talking about youth, we're talking about especially those that are able to interpret a message quickly. We're talking about the nomads, the agro-pastoralists, we're talking about nomadic pastoralists, we are talking about each and every person who finds themselves living in the rural community, which takes over 70% of Africa. And we're talking about the person who finds themselves living in ASAL communities. We're talking about that person who is ready to uptake this innovation to help them be able to move forward. And because we are on the technological revolution, we are talking about people who already have these phones, people who already are willing to understand how a smartphone works. And we're talking about, and when I listen to my colleagues speak, all of them speak of interfaces, they speak of dashboards, they speak of things that need these gadgets. So the groups that we're working with, we are of the knowledge that they have what it takes. And if not, they want to learn. When you come with that assumption, you're able to now understand where is the gap. You're able to understand that how do we merge this gap. So our areas of focus as EcoTech Innovation Hub and our groups of focus are those people who are ready to uptake. I'm a journalist by profession, and we kept on being told that when we do, news dissemination, it does not go out to the person who does not want to hear. It goes out to that person who wants to hear. So what I'm talking about when it comes to this work, it's the information, the EcoTech Innovation Hub, the communities that we want to work with, is not going out to the people who don't want to hear. It's going out to the people who are woke, the people who are ready to pick it up and run with. And I like that we are talking about youth having a better uptake and tech savviness and better uptake to technology. And with this youth, especially this season that we are in, everybody goes back home. Africans, we know about going back home. These youth are the ones that we're expecting to sit down with their grandparents, aging elderly people, members of family members, and help them be able to maneuver a phone, and not that maneuvering of I'm charging you to remove the airplane mode. It's the maneuvering of understanding, how do I get through my phone? And the internet connectivity and the smart gadgets is a plus, because where we are at is not where we were 10 years ago. So how do we use this to our advantage? And so the groups that we're working with, we are working with that assumption. Yes, we will have places where there is a literacy problem. Yes, we will have places where we have language barriers. But if we agree that this is a solution that Africans want to build, then we agree that these are barriers that can be passed, or these are barriers that we can be able to overcome to be able to achieve the actual connectivity that we want in urban areas, and be able to now move forward with these early warning systems, move forward with the applications that we are coming up with, and move forward with being able to create innovation and technology and that sustainability that you want under EcoTech Innovation Hub. So that the next time we are having an interface where there's an early warning system of an impending flood or an impending drought, then we are aware that the people who we have on ground are able to interpret simply, not technical words, because even for me, who is not an engineer or a techie, I might not be able to interpret. The other thing that I would want to mention here in the groups is that we are also alive to the fact that we would need to have the continuity of what we're bringing and working with the communities on ground with. And so here we are looking forward to having many champions, digital champions in our villages, in our communities, that they can continue making this information accessible. The drumming off of repeating a keyword or repeating something helps people be able to understand it, grasp it. And that is why every time when you're watching TV, ads keep on repeating themselves until now you can speak the ads in your mind, even not necessarily wanting to cram the ad, but just because it has repeated itself so many times, you have crammed it. And that's the same way we want to be able to have our digital champions within our communities to be able to continue having these conversations. And the other thing, as much as we're talking about groups, we also need access points. We have an opportunity to be able to start hubs, and that is why this pillar is called EcoTech Innovation Hub. Start hubs, just the same way we have Mama Boga and a kiosk. We can start a hub where this connectivity, say for example, electricity or solar powered energy, access to, you can come charge your phone, you can come get to see, if you don't have a smartphone, you can come see an interface, maybe a desktop, or a screen that has these warnings. You can come learn, you can come be able to just have a conversation, because the one thing that smartphones and internet connectivity has done is remove the humanness. So these access points are bringing back humans. These access points are helping us continue the knowledge even years after we have gone. So digital champions on ground, community members who are women, who are youth, the different demographics that we find in the communities who are also men, and their knowledge and what they can be able to pick. And then last but not least, ensuring that the message is simple, ensuring that the language is understandable, and ensuring we are moving together as a group. What I would say here at where we are talking about having low tech, simple technology, but high impact. Back to you, Betty.
Thank you. Low tech, simple tech, high impact technology. Nicholas and Julie, I'd like you to react to what Rosalia has said And Nicholas, I'll start with you. Just tell us what your experience has been in terms of the uptake of these technologies by the communities that are designed, that they are designed for. Yeah.
So the community's uptake can be a little bit challenge. It's always new things bring change, and change, common human nature is change is not something we readily accept. We have our doubts, our fears, and to overcome this kind of barriers when you're engaging the communities, you need to figure out ways to make uptake as interesting as possible. Let's think of things like incentivization, and also recently you find there's the idea of gamification of whatever tools you present to them. With such approaches, when you incentivize uptake over technology, you tend to have a higher uptake, because then it becomes exciting, because then they think there's something to gain out of it. A lot of times the incentivization might be taken to mean financial, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that. It could be that the use of the app, say at the training point, has a way of incentivizing and say giving youth data packs, or adding new knowledge to them, so that they think the more I gain from this, the easier it is to use, and the more they can champion for you the tool that they're using. Gamification could be that you have a way of making sure that people like playing games, even on their phones. It doesn't matter how simple they are. And if you found a way to make your applications have a way of gratification from interacting with the system, then maybe just you could use the same interface for your early warning system messaging, and have a simplified version of interactivity that has a gamification to it, so that that gratification makes the users want to use the material more. At the end of the day, you still have to keep in mind the fact that you're working with different stratified factions of a community. So whatever it is you present to them in terms of incentive or gamification must be able to meet that excitement and outlook of accepting it, becoming a trustworthy application to them. That's one way I would put it for them.
Julie? Sorry, thank you, Nicholas. Julie, your thoughts
Yeah.
on this?
Yeah, thank you very much, Betty. Nicholas has really touched on very critical things that we're also facing as a key challenge. But we also think on how to address it. And one of them already, Rosalia highlighted on digital champions. So on this app, we are thinking once we train the member state, can we have champions in each country? And this champion can also further have their own champion in different, maybe we can say administrative level 2, or counties, like example in Kenya, or districts in Uganda, so that you have at least some contact person you can call and say, how is it going in your level of assignment or so. So there's one approach. The second one that we have seen that has worked well. In fact, this week we have a team in Turkana trying to showcase the power of having this technology in our hands. Most cases we realize, even if you're in a meeting and you're conducting a training, it can take 5 minutes before someone looks at the phone. Could be WhatsApp, whatever it is. So this kind of discussion, what we're having with them, that even now when I'm talking to you, in the next 5 minutes, you'll see a pop-up on your phone and we'll check it. So if you're having those kind of engagement also on the phone, it will be quite interesting for them. The other thing we have pushed is that we're explaining to them that this platform is like, let's talk about WhatsApp or Twitter, whichever. It's just, ICPAC is providing a platform, but the user is you. So if the national government has administrative rights to onboard his user base to communicate with, it becomes quite interesting, because I'll be pushing the message myself. It's not becoming from ICPAC or whichever. So it's one area that we have seen is getting quite interesting with them. They are calling us back that, hey, I'm trying to push, but I'm getting this error. How can I fix it? So it's a good report that at least he's picking up slowly, but it's quite a slow progress, as Nicholas was highlighting earlier. And then the other thing is Yeah, the other thing is we are trying to have the callback tone. In Somalia, they tested a very good case study that we want to onboard. So let's say I call Betty now, instead of hearing probably a song on the background saying before Betty picks up the call or just a normal ringback tone, if that area is likely to experience flooding event, then I'll hear the message or the warning for flood. So it became quite interesting. And then some people would say that I'll tell the person not to pick up the call so that I can hear the full message. So that's how, again, interacting with the users become quite interesting. So this is one of the things that we're also trying to onboard. The other one that we are discussing with partners like WFP who are on the ground, and I think Nicola is the one who pointed this out, is procuring tablets to community leaders or area chiefs or whoever holds the barazas for communities. Initially, we had started with the radios, which was done successfully. So these tablets will help them, especially if they're able to read Swahili, English, or the local language that the system will be working on, because language is also a barrier we are facing. They can further translate it further to their normal grouping or sitting. If it is weekly or bi-weekly or monthly, they can decide on how they meet to translate this. So one element is getting them those gadgets that they can use, especially if they don't have smart gadgets. We are planning to procure this for a number of communities in South Sudan next year, especially those who experience flash flood events. Because most cases in South Sudan, you realize some flooding doesn't come from the rain in South Sudan, but either the highlands of Ethiopia or downstream in Uganda, especially when Uganda releases their dams or high flows without notifying South Sudan. They just start seeing too much water in the river that overtops the bank. So if these things, we're able to alert them early or inform them early that now in Uganda, they're releasing this volume of water and we have 30 days for it to arrive in South Sudan, and this will be the level. So government entities can take action in advance or inform the communities in good time. So that kind of engagement is what we are planning. But constantly, any workshop that we do, any forum we engage in, we always try to enlighten the participant that they have this platform, and these are the advantages that you can use it for. So Betty, these are some of the things in addition to what my colleague Nicholas have highlighted, I think builds upon each other. Back to you, Betty.
Thank you both you, Julie and Nicholas, for that. I think I'll stay with you, Julie, a little bit because now the conversation is moving to the decision-making part. We have the data, we have the innovation. How do we ensure that it's impactful and the decisions are being made for the betterment of the communities? You've said that, of course, it is important to ensure that these early warnings are done in a timely manner. So that you're not receiving an alert when the flood has already happened and you're like, oh my goodness, I wish I knew this, you know? So what is preventing the dissemination of this information in a quicker manner and more coordinated efforts at the local and national levels? And how is IGAD addressing this challenge?
Yeah, so one thing that we have noticed is at regional level, we can give advice on this, but then we need the national government to further take it to the last mile. So different entities, sometimes they don't really work together at the national level. Example I'll give for Kenya, where we have competition between National Disaster Management Unit, which is more or less headed by the police, and the National Disaster Operations Center, which is under the Ministry of Interior. So there's sometimes competition between these two entities. A good example is where there was a flooding in Kitui that one bus, there was an accident with one bus during that flooding and they're trying to cross the bridge. And in terms of response, these two entities now are fighting who is in charge. So there has to be a directive now from the Deputy President Office to assign someone, one of the institutions now to be in charge. Otherwise, it took more than 24 hours to decide now who operates. And you know, if there are two entities, one is headed by an army ex-general, the other one is a police, they follow chain of command. So this is a dilemma when it comes to warning and acting early in advance. So from IGAD level, we have thought of having standards or protocols in place that can guide the national government. In this case, we talk about anticipatory action, or rather trying to act in advance. So we develop roadmaps. For example, we have done for 3 countries so far. We started with Kenya, which was launched, I think, towards the end of last year, with all entities, government entities, NGOs, and the chair of that roadmap, or rather working group, is the National Disaster Operations Center, which is a mandated institution now by the government. In fact, they have a bill in parliament that will give them now the full authority to do this. And then the secretariat is the Kenya Red Cross Society, who now is the current secretariat of this group. So this helps us now to develop triggers and thresholds for different events. Talk about drought, talk about floods. And when these triggers are already fully developed and agreed on, you'll clearly have a definition on an SOP or a protocol. When do you need to start prepare to act? When do you actually start acting before the event? Or if it catches you by surprise, which response entities are supposed to be engaged in good time? And the resources made available from the national government budget. So these are some of the things ICPAC is trying to push to address this. For the other 2 countries like Somalia and South Sudan, they launched their roadmap this month. In fact, it was done back to back. 1 week was South Sudan, then the week after, Somalia did it. In fact, Somalia now, in December, they're planning to host a national dialogue platform for anticipatory action, where all partners, entities will be brought together. They discuss on how to operate at the national level. There are a number of thresholds and triggers already developed. So this will help the national government try to act early in order to make a decision in good time before the actual hazard or disaster strike. So I'll say these are some of the approaches and challenges we have faced, but more or less to address the challenges already you highlighted, Betty, is to have those protocol in place, roadmap in place, and SOPs that guide government or entities at the national level on when to act, what to do, and which institutions are responsible, so that at least we might to save lives as much as possible. I would say that Somalia has become a champion in this sense, that their flood anticipatory action protocol has been operational for the last 2 years. And normally in the news, you could see hundreds of people affected in Somalia. High number of impacts are being recorded. But for the last 2 years, these figures have significantly gone down. And we're always proud of this and using a case study for other countries to follow. They've also done the same for drought, when like regional forecast, what we did last season, indicating that there will be depressed or rather less rainfall this coming season. A country like Somalia takes it seriously, and the government buys insurance from Africa Risk Capacity to a certain level of millions in USD. Like the last one they received last year was 5 million payout when they reached the category of impact for drought. So such kind of precaution, kind of investment is also quite handy to help us manage this level of unclear decision making. But once you have the SOPs, protocol in place, and roadmap, it's very easy. So this is the level we are pushing for all the member states. So far, we have 3 in place. I think, Betty, I'll probably end at this point, but still further expand if need be. Back to you.
Thank you, Julie. I think even those case studies of Somalia are very good to hear, but we are hoping that our very own country, Kenya, picks up the effort, so that we can save lives and communities across the country. I'll come to you now, Rosalia. Of course, Julie is speaking from a regional perspective, government efforts as well. Let me hear from you what it takes for companies or farms or CSOs, CBOs such as Square One EcoAfrica to equip communities with the knowledge, the actual things that need to be done to ensure that as we take these innovations to the communities, we are equipping them with the knowledge to use them beyond the time when the CBOs and the non-profits are there doing the innovation.
Thank you, Betty. And before I get into your question about how do we then equip communities with the knowledge, I would want to speak a bit on the bureaucracy that my colleague Julie has mentioned. And I think bureaucracy looks very good until a decision needs to be made. And I want to, when he mentioned about the bus tragedy, that was loss of life when Fahari, hey, this Kiswahili, those ones, the cows, not cows, bulls, when they fight, the grass is what suffers. So bureaucracy, I think, is one of our biggest impediments, especially when it comes to decision making. And unfortunately, in government-led institutions, bureaucracy is the order of the day. So if this institution wants to fight who is more powerful, then the community is the one that is going to be affected, and the community is the one that suffers. So I think even as we continue having this conversation, let me just say it, bureaucracy needs to be addressed. Decision making needs to be addressed so that we get to a place where we know when there is disaster, there is no time to think who's more powerful, who's supposed to make the most decision. If it needs be, let the president of the country make that very needed decision at that time. It reminded me, and I know I digress a bit, but it reminded me of when Garissa University was attacked back in 2015. We lost so many students here in Kenya. Why? Because the decision of who should we send to go and fight terrorists took an entire day. And I think that just shows of how decisions, especially when it comes to disasters, need to be made quick and need to be made with a sane mind. Not about who made it. It's not about who makes the headlines of who made that decision that helped people in an affected area. It's about how many people were we able to save with the decision that was made quick enough. Anyway, I get back to the question that you had asked about how do we equip communities with the knowledge and use of climate technologies. I had mentioned a few when we were talking about EcoTech Innovation Hub and how we are getting into communities. Firstly, we said that we are not getting into communities as the doers. We're getting into communities as the people who are being guided by the actual doers, who are the community members. What we're bringing on board is the knowledge of basic AI, the knowledge of Internet of Things, the knowledge of early warning systems that can be put into technology, the partnerships with tech people who are and engineers who can be able to tell us, look, yes, we have been having these perennial disasters, but we have a way to help us be able to adapt to these perennial disasters, and then now tell ourselves, because we know in October we have a heavy rain, so what happens? Or a short rain, sorry. So what happens? This happens. In our area, it floods. So what do? We have already the data from back. So we are able to forge forward. And how are we making that decision? How are we keeping them? We are bringing now this knowledge, that there is this knowledge. And this knowledge is what is taking over the world. And this is the knowledge that we need to now start putting into the knowledge that you have, the back data that you have, and be able to move it forward. We are talking about getting to a space where we understand the environment. We are talking about getting to a space where we understand the language that is spoken in those in that village. We're talking of a space where we understand when the community person tells us, wait, we don't want to do anything technology, we just want to eat. We want food. We understand that they are the ones that guide us moving forward. How do we get in? How do we work? How do we co-create? How do we get ourselves to be able to scale? So ours is very simple when we get into this space. We are coming in to learn. After we have learned, the next thing that we want to be able to do is to understand. Then after we have understood, we now start to co-create. Then when we co-create, we now start to test. And sorry, after we co-create, we want to be able to, before we co-create, we map. And then after we map, we co-create. After we co-create, we want to test. And if we test and it works, the same as my colleague mentioned, Julie, when we test and it works, we then adapt. And once we adapt and it works better, we scale. That is the simple way that we're bringing in this basic technology that you're talking about, to help the communities be able to see, look, I have this a problem, I have ideas of this solution, then you've come up with this technology. Now let's merge all of this to be able to come up with ways that are going to help us be able to adapt to the perennial, the adversities, the disasters that strike whenever we have the change in weather patterns. Early warning systems now becomes easier because you have brought them together. You have brought what you're bringing, because EcoTech, we're bringing technology. But then we are not saying that we're the owners of technology. We're saying we're coming to co-create. We're coming to speak together. We're coming to see how does that work. We're bringing those practicalities, the tools, but then they have the data. They have what you call the knowledge. They are the custodians of what has been happening to them. So they're the ones who are able to tell us, this is what has been happening. This is what we think we need. And then now the technology that you're bringing to ground, you're able to bring it up to fruition. The other thing that I would want to mention is our schools. Every time there is a disaster, most people in our villages, in our communities, rush for safety in schools. If schools are well built to be able to accommodate people when disasters strike, it means that and they are accessible to most people in the village, it means it becomes an access point even before the disaster. So how do we partner with schools to be able to ensure that this information gets to our villagers? Do we get a room there where it is an access point for technology? It comes to early warning systems, to understanding technology in climate change and weather patterns, to understand how do I do climate smart agriculture. And this is not information for children, much as children are learning in school. I'm talking about being able to partner with schools to have a space where adults, elders, local people can come and have conversations, even if it's a Saturday, and then now make it recurrent, make it something that people now enjoy doing. Just like we said, that if you want people to understand something, whether they like it or not, somehow it sticks in your head when you keep on repeating. So that access point partnerships with schools, school heads, because it is the one focal point that we know most probably is the safest point within our localities and our villages. And then you're talking about using languages that people understand. We're not going with big English technology and everything. When you get there and they're speaking mother tongue, they're speaking Kiswahili, they're speaking, please have someone who translates for you, someone who understands. A contact person on ground is very, very important to be able to communicate, and so that we are saying the same thing and being able to build what we need to build. And then, as I had mentioned, that we have a thematic area called Gender in Climate Resilience. We are talking about the demographics of a community. Who are the people, when we work with, will be able to move this project forward? We know the demographics and the different roles people play in our communities. So here we are talking about engaging men when we need to, engaging women when we need to, engaging the youth when we need to. Why? Because we have understood the different demographics and the roles that they play in adapting to climate change, the roles that they play in technology, the roles that they play in livelihood in a community. What you're talking about is being able to increase the household adoption. And by that is by understanding the different demographics, the different roles that they play, and then be able to now say, look, this is what we're bringing to you, and we are going to use this demographic because we have seen, for example, women, they are the carriers of information. They are able to spread word in chamas, at church, when they are meeting with other women in the marketplace and every other place. We have understood that men, look, these are men. They can be able to have the authority, they can be able to pass the message, they can be able to do all those things that they continue doing in their villages. So how do we get ourselves into those different roles and be able to pass this message of the basic tools that we're bringing to them, the digital tools that we're bringing to them, the data tools that we're bringing to them in a way that they're adaptive and in a way that can be able to move to scale. So those are the things that we're thinking about when it comes to EcoTech technology, EcoTech Innovation Hub, and more so digital innovation, data tools, and early warning systems.
Thank you, Rosalia, for that. We shall be closing this in the next 8 minutes or so. I feel like we have a lot of content. We should have needed more time, but we will work with the time that we have. I will give Nicholas just 2 minutes to answer this question before I ask for your closing remarks, team. And so for you, Nicholas, I'd like to hear from you as innovators, as people who are providing solutions, co-creating with local communities. How can we move feedback up now to agencies such as IGAD and even counties or national governments? How do we ensure that as we are implementing these solutions in the local rural communities, we are also giving feedback to the policymakers and the people who are supposed to ensure that the infrastructure is there, the policies are there and the bureaucracy is removed? How can we ensure that from COHESU's standpoint?
So yeah, once the said red tape that Rosalia has mentioned through bureaucracy is kind of overcome, which is usually a big challenge, we need to start thinking about strengthening our feedback loops. The most important part of this is what I mentioned earlier. We have to turn our communities and our interactions with these societies and make sure that they become data producers rather than just passive recipients of data information. And so having strong data producer outputs and making it an active interaction between the community as data producers. And then, like we said, we could have digital scorecards and at the interface level with the community leaders and groups. This information needs to be looked back into the analytics of the local administrative and sub-county reporting stations. So you must begin at grassroots feeding the information back to the entry point of where the national system picks its data from. So having shared, we'll call them in the technical language, you'll hear them talking about APIs. And this is basically how do we have moderation between the people receiving the data and their feedback. You have to consider their feedback as true data because theirs, like I said, is lived experience. Until their data reaches you, you're making a lot of assumptions. So they should be the ones to dictate through the co-creation how they as data producers will want their information and their experiences sent back up the loop. It's important that at the bare minimum, the grassroots level data has to hit the national grid at the lowest level possible so that it flows naturally with the rest of the county, sub-county data into the national grid. Then it will make sense. Rather than it jumping from local to national, and yet the moderators from in between the policymakers haven't seen it. Then you start having the red tape that you thought you've destroyed comes back. You start having bureaucracy saying, we didn't see this didn't come from us. It must originate from the grassroots level to the basic level of entry where, whether it's through this community health provider system, social workers provider system, you have to have that two-way flow to ensure that regional agencies see that hyper local reality. And the communities can now see that the data they're producing influences policy and preparedness. That's how I'd put it.
Thanks, Nicholas, and thank you even for keeping it short and very concise. Julie, so that we can release you on time, I will throw it to you to give us your closing remarks. And for you, I'll ask you a very simple question. If you could prioritize one investment or policy shift that will strengthen the ASAL resilience of those communities, the rural communities, what would it be and why?
I'll vote for policy shift because policy is what will guide everything. If like my colleagues were saying, if there's an issue of who does what and there's competition, if a policy in place and framework is very clear, And now we need to know where the money goes, because money also will follow a guideline. So I would say policy will be the best for me. And this policy will shape so many things. Talk about interoperability of system, harmonization of action in place on triggers and threshold. You can talk about common alerting protocols. Can systems talk to each other? Can your system be aligned with this one and so on? So I would say protocol will be like the game changer in this place, or rather policy will be the guy. Because in any case, you realize even in our institutions, like where I work in IGAD, once there's a new policy, there's a definite shift that follows that policy. So I will still vote for a national government to streamline policy or establish policies and make early warning as a development agenda in the policies. Once that is done, we'll be able to save so much lives and invest wisely when it comes to disaster and hazard related issues. Over to you, Betty.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Julie. Thank you for joining us. I think I will release you, then I'll remain with Rosalia and Nicholas for just a little bit, but
Yes.
asante sana. Square One EcoAfrica is very grateful.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Betty, and good to meet you, Rosalie and Nicholas. Yeah, bye-bye. Great.
Very much. Julie.
Bye. Yeah.
And of course,
Betty,
keeping in touch to see how
Betty, we
we
can't hear
can
you.
work together moving forward. Thank you. Now,
Betty, can you
let
hear
me
me?
come to you, Nicholas.
Betty, we are losing you, your audio. Sorry, Betty, I don't know if you can hear me. We lost you. The entire...
I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah. So Betty has moved the mantle. Can you hear me now?
I have been hearing you the entire time. I just think it's my sound that has not been getting to you.
Yes. It was dragging. So yeah, you can continue.
Okay, did at least Julie get my goodbye and thank you?
I don't think so.
Oh my.
I think, but I think
quite unfortunate.
The way he has left with having understood the drugged conversation. So do not worry. And then at least it's an opening opportunity to continue this conversation even offline.
Sure thing. Thank you, Rosalia, for that. Let me come to you, Nicholas, and ask you the very same question that I asked Julie before he left. And what would be that one thing that you would pick to strengthen ASAL resilience for rural communities?
Sorry. So maybe from a technological standpoint, I'd say back to basics. I talked about first principles. Once you tear down and see what your bare minimums are, you want to now build things ground up, from the ground zero grassroots level all the way up, and stay with the bare minimums and then use it as your structural backbone. Your tools should be low cost, low energy, I would say, long range and long bandwidth tools. We can talk about the social network of it, where you want proper county government partnerships for legitimacy, like I said, data integration upwards, and for service alignment. For the youth and women networks, you want them to greatly, if you have your youth and women stratifications adapting and accepting the localization part of it, so that you have continuity of use over a long period of time, making it sustainable. Then, of course, interplayer interaction. You need all the players in the ground having a harmonized way of interaction. You see, a lot of times every other program is bringing in a new project and they run what they're running, they bring an application, it ends, and that application moves on. Then a new one comes. So at some point in time, when you go to grassroots levels, whether it is the community or their local leadership, they're running too many parallel programs. And we're getting to a point where people need to start harmonizing what they're doing. So if partnerships like this are built, then you'd have central points and common goals rather than distributed goals based on funding. You find that then the goal is people receiving funding rather than solving a problem. So in as much as we have our interactions with the co-creations and you have the tools of the innovation, harmonization across the stakeholders must occur. So I would say joint partnerships would be very critical that take accountability of everybody being able to provide the necessary outputs in a common goal. That's how I look at it.
Thank you. Thanks, Nicholas. I think that is a very good point.
Sorry, Betty. Betty, sorry, I think your internet is still misbehaving, but we are happy that we have
Funding.
connectivity. We have connectivity across board, and it is moving forward. Sorry, Betty, can I continue? Your audio is still dragging, and your internet connectivity, I think, is still low. And I think I will take it up. Okay, thank you, Betty. I think I will take it up to do my closing remarks. And Betty had asked a question on what would we prioritize if we were to only have one investment. And I wanted to mention, both my colleagues have removed words from my mouth. Julie mentioned that we need policy shifts. And I think that is very, very key, because we cannot continue talking about things that are already on way of doing things while we have a guiding document of ways of doing things. However, I want to add to policy shift to at least let's start reading these policies. Because if there is something that is affecting us, even as I close, is the fact that we have so many policies for so many things. But if you were to ask us today, how does this policy guide for example, early warning systems? And if it is there, people will be, let me go back to my document. The policies are being affected by the drawer desk effect, where we do policies and then they continue gathering dust in our desks. On our desks, they become the beautifiers of our desks. So I think the policy shift is very important, but then also let's start internalizing the policies that we have. Then I would want to say that, Nicholas, I think you need to join SOAR, because you have really put everything into context. We are talking about working with communities from the ground up, and you're talking about ensuring that it is community-led. And so my closing remark would be that I would talk about community-centered digital infrastructure. This is the just energy transition, this is solar-powered connectivity, this is data tools, and this is the trusted digital literacy. And my parting shot is that if communities understand, trust, and co-own the technology, resilience builds itself. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. I don't know if Betty is back, and I am so glad that people were able to give us an opportunity to have this conversation. It is a very needed conversation. Thank you so much, Nicholas. Thank you so much, Julie in absentia. We have really learned a lot. I am not a tech person, but I have learned so much. The things that you go and start shining, you know, we are going for the December holidays. You go and start shining in the rural areas of the technological world that you know, and yet you gather gathered them from this meeting. I think that was impressive. And now we want to be able to get this talk off this Zoom meeting into the ground. Let us continue trying as much as possible to implement the things that we want, we say, so that action becomes the leader of the words that we speak. So we are walking the talk. And I know that partnerships begin like this, and we're hoping to be able to work together with the different groups that are here, the institutions, ICPAC, IGAD, COHESU, to be able to take this talk from this Zoom meeting to the actual ground and now start seeing the transformational impact that we're talking about. Thank you so much, Betty, for moderating us. Thank you so much for the people that joined. This Zoom meeting is going to be available on our socials for sharing and also getting to release them and see what you can be able to take to move this conversation forward. From me, my name is Rosalia Wangoi. I am the executive lead and the founder, and I thank all my colleagues who joined the meeting and Betty for moderating us. She leads the visibility, networking, and advocacy, and we're hoping that this conversation lives here and continues offline and online to our different communities. Thank you so much, and in case, apologies, we didn't give opportunities to ask questions, but we can continue having this conversation offline and online on our social platforms. If you did have any input or any addition, please do not shy away from engaging with us, and then we can continue having this conversation. Share this conversation with your contacts and followers so that we can spread the word. Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon. If Betty is not yet back, I think we are safe to say bye-bye and have a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, I know. Asanteni.
Thank you
Betty,
very
you're
much.
back?
Betty's back.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Your audio has refused. Thank you, people. I think my colleague can end the call. Asanteni, but you can leave at will.
Thank you very much, everybody.